So, it's April 30th at the time of making this video, and Wuthering Waves is just around the corner, and I see a variety of different YouTubers talking about it. So, I figured if I'm going to be making Wuthering Waves my main game on this channel, I should probably talk about it too. Now, these other videos I've seen are either legitimate Doom posts or actual criticisms of the game with legitimate concerns. And these videos gain a variety of different responses, ranging from agreements to toxicity and other such responses. But this video is actually not going to be about good advertisement or whether they will succeed or fail. It's actually just simply 5 things as a future player I would want to see in the game. Now, obviously, it doesn't matter if it's when the game releases or if it arrives in a later update. Usually when I give games a hard chance, it's between 6 months to a year before I make my final verdict. So I want to give the game some time to not only go through its 2-week release of players feeling the game out, see where it is after 2 months worth of new banners, events, and updates, along with an extra 2.5 months of me really getting a feel for the characters, mechanics, and the true feel of the gameplay loop after all that time. Now, if some of the stuff that I listed is already in the game, then by all means, correct me if I'm wrong here. But as someone who has only really watched combat, and unfortunately not made it into neither of the CPTs, nor watched long-form gameplay videos, update videos, or story-related videos, I am spoiler-free for the most part. I have no idea what transpired in the CPTs for the most part, so I'll be relying on you guys to let me know if you agree with these wants or if they're already in the game. Alright, so here we go. Number 1, and this one is actually very important to me. It's something that I mentioned in my 5 ways to fix PGR video, is to add a more engaging co-op. I seriously hope that we do not get the co-op gameplay loop of doing short domains with friends to grind for RNG loot for a limited time. I don't want that feeling of emptiness that you'll eventually come across as you're going around assisting a friend open chests and interact with the world, as the rest of the guests in said world cannot do anything else but kill enemies. Now, another thing that definitely should be a thing, as I've mentioned before, is adding things like dungeons or even a multiplayer equivalent to a 12k in PGR. Now that would be awesome, where no matter how built you may be, teamwork and strategy would be preferred over all others, similar to my Bloody Palace idea in my last video. Now, coming in at number 2 would be to learn from PGR's mistake of early story handling. Alright, so what do I mean by this? So, people who are fans of Punishing Grey Raven, and even the PGR purists, cannot deny that the early game is too slow, and when it comes to the story, it's very poorly distributed and can be a bit difficult to digest with how it's all set up. I would want to see Wuthering Waves have a more appropriately paced story without much filler in between important things. I can understand the argument of adding filler to supply longevity to the game, but I feel as though there are other ways to do this. As we all know, people are in disagreement with having too much filler if we look at things like One Piece, Dragon Ball Z, Naruto Shippuden, though I will say some of the filler things added in these shonen were fun, a lot of it was unnecessary. And if we bring it back to a game's perspective that is of an open world gacha, the same can indeed be said for Genshin Impact. But rounding it back to PGR, a lot of the beginning chapters were slow. And yes, while it did do its job of establishing its characters, it could have easily done it in a more timely manner, with an improved style of writing that would be able to hook the reader in, without making them want to press the skip button as soon as possible. So I guess to sum up my number 2, it would be to have good story progression. Number 3 would be make 5-star equivalent exclusivity more apparent. To better explain this point, I was talking to my boy Smack about how the 5 and 4-star equivalents don't exactly feel too different. He was explaining things like how the designs, gameplay, and overall feel of the 5-star and 4-star characters didn't feel apparently different to him on an obvious surface level. and I disagreed with him at the time, as I do like the way the characters looked, and I enjoyed the fact that there was little difference in style of gameplay between these 4-star and 5 stars. I thought that it wasn't super bad. It was fine, as it gives more players more originality to their mains, and they would probably enjoy playing the game more if they're able to use their favorite characters without too much of a struggle, without having them feel like they have to pull a 5-star. But that's when I began thinking. I started to think back to a very specific point, more so a point on PGR's constructs. And I thought back to the B rank, A rank, and S rank units in PGR when the game first came out, and during the time that I first started playing. A ranks and S ranks, at least to me, didn't feel too incredibly different at the time of my playing in the early days, which I thought was cool. But it made me realize the A ranks that are being released nowadays, well, they look and perform in a far more entertaining and flashier way than even the original S ranks of Punishing Grey Raven. And when we compare Gen 1 characters to Gen 2 characters, they blow them out of the water to the point where Kuro even had to create leaps for them, which is an update to their kit and damage for those who don't know, to make actually getting these characters, well, worth it again. When I look at Wuthering Waves characters and gameplay, like Yang Yang's for example, I dread to think how unbalanced the game's power creep would become, as they would have to release even wilder characters in the future in order to sell a banner. To give people a better reason to pull, I should say, which is normal for a gacha, but still, I wouldn't want to see too much power creep in the game. And I don't want to see Wuthering Waves just be an open world PGR equivalent where not even 12k bosses are even a threat over in PGR anymore, where its main selling point becomes far too trivialized: its combat. So I would like to see 5-star and 4-star characters not only both be usable in their own right, but to have an apparent line in the quote-unquote fun factor, so that Kuro Games doesn't have to escalate our next 5 stars we will be receiving so quickly. Now, number 4 is an easy one. I would love to see the same level of communication the Wuthering Waves team and community had during the end of the CBT1 remain consistent. Having them go out of their way to listen to legitimate and plausible concerns or ideas would indeed make Kuro Games a loved developer in the gacha space, maybe even the most loved, as they would be giving us, their player community, a chance, a proper voice. Though listening to all of the different concerns and their problems would be a bit of a double-edged sword if we really want to break it down and think about it. We wouldn't want them to listen to absolutely everything a community would want to suggest, as some of these suggestions would actually be empty and hollow complaints. We also wouldn't want the community feeling too comfortable with the idea of, if the company releases something that they don't like, then they can just easily change it by overly complaining about it, whether it be on social media or directly at them on other social spaces. So I suggest perhaps having a proper social media manager with an eye for suggestions and people to communicate back to their team. Having multiple of these scouts would quite frankly be amazing for their game's overall health and longevity. Now, for the final one, this is a bit of a personal one. Fucking add Crimson Weave Alpha to the fucking game. Coming in at number 5 would be to please make the majority of your events combat events. Having cutesy events here and there is fine, but make the majority of your events revolve around the selling point of your game. It's combat with its outstanding looking characters. While I do understand the need for appeasing to the casual player base, as usually casual player bases are one of the most important components for games like these, we can clearly see Wuthering Waves wants to stand out by polishing and making amazing combat better, and overall just hopefully keeping the bosses consistent with being challenging enough with more advanced techniques and mechanics and movesets. I want to see events like parrying events, combo time events, survival events, on some Halo Reach shit. I feel as though these kinds of events would be a very well received gameplay loop for events by the future Wuthering Waves fanbase, myself included. Well, aside from all of that, I want you guys to tell me what you thought. How do you feel about my list? Did you hear anything that you agreed with? Did you hear anything that you disagreed with? Do you think I'm a fucking idiot? Do you think I'm a genius? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear it, but I do have to go right now. So anyways, I genuinely hope you guys take care, and as always, peace.